Hello and welcome to our next Trailhead DX session. Here I am Mars Hall and we'll be talking about developing a web app with Heroku Connect, specifically this real-world use case with the Bay Lights. So I am Mars. I have been a web developer for a couple decades now. Over these decades, I've been asked numerous times to integrate with Salesforce, integrate in all different ways. Of course, one of the most frequent requests is, we've got a website, a web app, and we want to collect leads from our website. So how do we get that data off of our website and into Salesforce, all the way to much more complicated, sophisticated use cases like running a e-commerce system where you want to synchronize, say, contracts and accounts from an e-commerce system into Salesforce and back. So these are all different use cases that I've been working on up until I joined Heroku Salesforce about a year ago. So when I joined Salesforce, all I really knew about was using the REST API, doing all kinds of synchronization magic with REST API, also actually bulk API, but that was really the extent of my experience. So going from there, hopefully some of you who are experiencing this session will relate to this position. All right, so the application we're going to be looking at is specifically about the San Francisco Bay Lights. So if you're not familiar with the Bay Lights, they are this beautiful procedurally generated LED art installation on the Bay Bridge here in San Francisco. This project was originally launched in 2012 as a temporary, essentially 2-year-long art installation. And there was so much excitement. It really started becoming an icon of San Francisco Bay. And so Illuminate, the nonprofit organization that produced this public work of art, was already teaming up with Salesforce Foundation, that's salesforce.org, in order to manage their donors. And so they wanted to relaunch the Bay Lights as a permanent installation with all the hardware, fixing all of these lights to the bridge in a way that was maintainable and super durable. Minimum lifespan of 10 years for all these parts, along with budgets to continue maintenance on them. So they were interested in expanding their relationship with Salesforce in order to help create a personal connection with this artwork, in order to help fund this artwork by dedicating these individual lights. So what we were looking at was a pro bono project that we did here internally for Illuminate to develop this custom application. So the idea is to enable the dedication of all 25,000 of these LED lights. And a dedication is essentially just a donation where then the donor can immediately personalize their light with a photo that they upload and some text. So yeah, essentially we started out this project and we started looking at what are our design requirements. So this custom Bay Lights experience was the first requirement. And by custom experience, we mean it's not something that can be addressed by like a declarative, already built as a template kind of system. We wanted a way to realistically map the lights on the bridge into this application with inspiring interaction in order to make these dedications searchable and shareable and enable people that actually make these dedications to also download some kind of a keepsake, a certificate. Our next design requirement was integrating with their existing technology. So as I mentioned earlier, they already use Salesforce as a nonprofit. So they use what is called the NPSP, the Nonprofit Starter Pack. And that is a app exchange package that provides special workflows and donor management specifically for nonprofits. And so with that, essentially they have their donor and donation data as well as their entire admin UI that their staff uses. All of this they wanted to keep as familiar and consistent as possible as we implemented this app. Also, they have a nonprofit PayPal account, which is how they were hoping to accept their donations, not set up some new payment processor. Finally, we needed to launch fast. So all in all, this was a 5-week timeline from inception of the project in late September to the beta launch in November. So it was super fast. We had a tiny development team. I was the primary developer, and then we had some other support from some other engineers here at Heroku. And then, of course, in launching fast, it was very important to make sure that the end product was elegant and functional. And in doing that, we also really wanted to push that inspiring experience. So it's really trying to find a balance in how to produce something that's both elegant and very much pushing the envelope in what we can do. So what we landed on architecture-wise was building a universal web front end. So this is a very modern style of web development where we, in this case, we used React.js, which is a JavaScript UI framework, to build a responsive front end, and we run that on the Heroku platform. And then, of course, we were going to use Salesforce as the back end. So we wanted to keep the donation and Baylight data modeled directly in Salesforce and not, basically we wanted to extend the Salesforce data out into this app and not have the app duplicate and make their information systems more complex. And so to tie this web front end together with the Salesforce back end, we use this fantastic technology called Heroku Connect, which is a Salesforce data synchronization system that bidirectionally moves data into a Postgres database running at Heroku so that you can actually build applications on Heroku that use Salesforce data directly through a Postgres database. So you don't have to do Salesforce API calls. All right, so this is a great quote by our all-time favorite Steve Jobs. It's something that almost anything you want to build with technology, you have to keep in mind. We really wanted to make this simple and elegant. We didn't want to leave any donors confused about what was happening. We wanted to make it work for people that are unfamiliar with computers. We wanted to make it work for people that have tiny old handsets that, you know, a 3-generation old iPhone or a modern PC. So throughout this process, we had to keep stripping away, like, what is the essence of what we need to build to make this happen. All right, so with that, let's actually take a look at our live web application. We'll step through the main features before we dive into some details about the architecture and the development flow. You should be able to, at any point, also visit this URL in your own web browser, sif.illuminate.org. So here we are, 2 main calls to action. So we have the donation flow, which we'll go through in a moment, and then we have the main search exploration interface. All right, so in the search exploration interface, you'll see these are the most recent dedications. You can just tap on any of those, and it will immediately transition over to zoom in to that specific light. So we actually have mapped out all of the coordinates for the lights into this huge deep zoom image. So as you go through these dedications, you'll see that they all actually zoom in to their own specific light. If you're curious about exactly where this is on the bridge, you can tap this little locate button and see the panorama style, where then you can actually zoom in, there we go, and pan around on it and see exactly where that light is on the bridge. And so that deep zoom interface is a whole nother piece of technology which we're not going to dive into, but if you're curious, you can look up OpenSeaDragon. That's a project that was open sourced by Microsoft, which enables these kinds of deep zoom images. All right, so with the search interface explained, let's do a quick step through what the donation flow looks like. So I'm actually going to step over to our dev site. So this is, you could actually hit this too, but this is a dev site running on Heroku. So it looks just like the production one, but it's not the production data. So we're going to pick a donation level here. Let's go to Shining Light. And we'll actually donate. So this uses the PayPal Sandbox since it is a dev site. Hopefully this works. Sometimes the PayPal Sandbox is unreliable, like there. No problem. We'll just try again. It's a good test environment if it fails regularly. Okay, let's donate. All right, donation successful. Let's return to the site. So here you'll see our site is waiting for PayPal to call back with confirmation of the payment, which it did. And so now we're on to the personalization step. So here we'll say dedicated by Mars. I'm going to pick a photo. So this is using a Heroku add-on called FileStack. It's a really awesome file upload utility. And we'll just pick a picture here. So this is a picture of my little guy Dash. We'll make a dedication to him. All right, so here we can see a preview of what our dedication will look like. Then we continue on. And at this point, we're given a public URL for the light, along with these links to share. So like if we click the Twitter share, you'll see it pre-populates with I just dedicated a light, along with some hashtags and the URL to my specific light. We also have this certificate available. This certificate is rendered by another Heroku add-on called Blitline. It is essentially a high-res photo image with the donor's name and specific dedication information set into the image there. So it's something that could be printed out on photo paper, maybe given as like a graduation present or slipped under the Christmas tree, any number of things. All right, and then finally, let's just look. This is what the actual public light looks like. So that is the two main functions of the app there. So what you actually see working is this universal web app. So here is the architecture of the front end of this app. You can visit this GitHub repository, Heroku Create Render 4R, if you're curious about exactly what this tech stack really is made of. You can also reuse this for your own project if you'd like. So what I will point out right now is that essentially this universal front end uses a Node.js user interface server to serve both the dynamic React JavaScript app to web browsers on all kinds of devices for people to interact with, as well as serving static content of every single page so that crawlers such as Facebook, Internet Archive, even Google can read the content of these pages. Also, people that don't have JavaScript enabled for some reason would be able to see the content of the pages. So now we're going to dive into the back end. So this is the API server, which is used by all aspects of that universal front end, and that through that API server is where the data comes from, and that is where our Heroku Connect integration happens. So what does it mean to build an app with Heroku Connect? So in this case, what we're doing is we want to think about how we're going to model the app's data with Salesforce itself. So one of the frequent patterns you'll see when people try to synchronize with Salesforce is they might have an application, a custom app that they've already built, and then they've also got their Salesforce instance. And making the data match, be able to synchronize between those two systems can be full of complexities. So if you're building a new app and you know you're going to integrate with Salesforce, it's great to just plan this. It's great to just plan your models to fit with the Salesforce objects directly. So in our case, we have only five object types. We use the Salesforce standard opportunity, account, and contact, as well as a custom payment object, which comes from the nonprofit starter pack, and a custom Bay Lite object, which we created specifically to facilitate this app. So when we use Heroku Connect and we talk about modeling the data in Salesforce, what we're really talking about is modeling the data up here at the top of this flowchart. And then Heroku Connect performs this flow to essentially synchronize the data out to our Heroku app. So there's quite a few different steps to this flow, as well as different aspects of configuration and ways that you can make parts of it work faster or slower or be read-only or read-write. We're not going to go into great detail about all these configuration capabilities, but you can visit this devcenter.heroku.com URL in order to find out more about all the different ways that you can set up Heroku Connect. All right, so let's just jump right into what it looks like to attach Heroku Connect to an application. So here I am on the Heroku dashboard. I've entered into the Create New App function, and here I'm just going to create an app. We'll call it TDX Example. And it just takes a moment for that app to be created. And then we'll jump here to the Resources tab. And in the Resources tab, this is where we can create add-ons. And so in order to use Heroku Connect, we need to have two things. We need to have our Postgres add-on. So we're just going to attach a free Heroku instance. And then we will add the Connect add-on. We'll also provision just a free version of it here. And so once those are both attached, you can enter the dashboard for either of these add-ons. We'll jump over here to Heroku Connect. And after it does a little authentication dance, we will be deposited into our Heroku Connect setup. So we will leave this screen for now, but we will essentially pick up from this point in a demo in a few minutes here. All right, so what do you have to do to make Connect work with your app? So there are several different aspects. The first is, of course, authorization. So in order for Heroku Connect to be able to synchronize data with a Salesforce org, you have to authorize Connect to access that org. So this is a single user that you're authorizing with access. And what this means is that whoever you authenticate Heroku Connect as, all of their permissions will be applied to Heroku Connect. So ideally, in development, when you're experimenting with it, it's no problem if you just use your built-in system administrator user. But when you actually start looking at moving to production, where you're going to be dealing with customer data, with sensitive personal data, you want to actually create a distinct, limited user specifically for Connect. And so that user is going to, like through all the different Salesforce audit logs and feeds, you're going to see this user that Connect is authorized as appearing as the actor on every record it touches. So last modified by, created by, owned by, all of these different aspects are going to be assigned to this Heroku Connect user. And there's nothing special about this user as far as Heroku Connect goes. It's still subject to all the permissions and validations that any other user are in Salesforce. So the next thing to think about after authorization is the data flow. So once again, Heroku Connect it's not a special citizen. It uses the Force.com APIs just like any other external integration does with Salesforce. And so it uses the SOAP APIs, bulk APIs, streaming APIs, metadata API. I honestly don't know how many other APIs it might use, but you can imagine when you start seeing how much work it does, it touches a lot of the surface area. So if Heroku Connect is using all of these standard APIs in order to synchronize data with the Postgres database, very important design concept here is that you need to design for data locality with Postgres, not with Salesforce. And what I mean by that is you can do transactional work in your Postgres database, but the synchronization of those transactions, of that data, is not real time. So you're not dealing in the Salesforce transaction world as if you're working in Apex. You're working with locality to Postgres. And so while this might seem like a problem, this is actually a great advantage. Because what it means is that the latency of how your app responds to the user is bound to the Postgres database attached to the app, not to the Salesforce org that's connected through the cloud. So once again, data locality with the Postgres database. You want to think about it in terms of Salesforce could literally be turned off and your app will still be working against that Postgres database, and when Salesforce comes back, it will resync. All right, another aspect of data flow is much like with triggers in Apex, you can design reactive behaviors with the Postgres database. So what this means is that as data changes, as users take actions in the Salesforce interface or in other integrated applications, you can design behaviors that will react to those changes. And so the way we do that is by writing Postgres triggers that essentially send notifications up to the application layer, where the application can be subscribed to Postgres notifications and actually perform work asynchronously, reacting to these changes. So a good example of this is that certificate that you saw. After I made a dedication, I could download that high-resolution photographic certificate. That is generated by a reactive behavior, where when the right donor data appears in the Postgres database, it fires off a asynchronous job in Heroku that does that image generation process. So image generation is a great thing to farm out to Heroku apps, especially with these kinds of reactive behaviors. Finally, one of the most important concepts of working with Salesforce data through Heroku Connect is dealing with related objects. So what do you do when you need to create a set of related objects? Like for this Shine It Forward Bay Lights app, we have to create let's see here, it's an opportunity, it's a contact, it's a payment, and a Bay Light. We have to update a Bay Light record. So we have 4 different related records, related objects, that all need to be transactionally created together. And so to do that, through Heroku Connect, we use this special feature called the external ID. And so an external ID is a custom field that you add in Salesforce to each object, and you give it the external ID data type. And then in your Heroku app, when you want to create a tree of these related objects, you can pre-populate these external ID fields to properly link the records up. And Heroku Connect will take care of creating the records in the right order in order to build up the foreign key relations. So it really solves a challenging problem that we have with using the API. So as of the very most recent Salesforce release, which is summer 16, there is now an API called Composite Tree, which does solve these problems in a lot of cases where you want to create related objects via API. But that is for API-specific stuff, so here we're talking about how to do it with Heroku Connect. All right, so with all of those different aspects in mind, let's talk about how we actually build something using this data model. So the idea here is that we want to modify the Salesforce setup, create our customizations, update the Heroku Connect mappings, capture all of this configuration, and then load it locally onto our computer where we have a Postgres database and the application code that we're working on in order to develop new functionality. So in this case, we're going to look at adding an anniversary date to these Bay Light dedications. So this is just an imaginary feature I came up with in order to demonstrate this dev flow. But it could be an interesting feature, in fact, where these dedications would actually, when you dedicate them, you can give them a specific date, and then you could imagine that maybe dedications would be featured on their anniversary date somehow, or maybe Illuminate would actually send out some kind of a commemoration message on that date. But anyway, it's an interesting concept for a feature. So let's go through how we would actually implement this. All right, so here I've created a little screencast which we'll just follow through in order to demonstrate. So here we're in the Salesforce setup for the org. and we're going to go to the opportunity fields in order to add a custom field. So we do a new custom field, and we're creating an anniversary date, so we're going to pick a date type. Then here we'll name our field using the same convention that we use for all of our other custom fields throughout this app, which is shine it forward and then the name of the field. And then here we'll just accept the standard Salesforce visibility and layouts for the field. And so down here now we should see, there it is, shine it forward, anniversary on. All right, so now we'll go over to our Heroku Connect dashboard. And let's go to the opportunity mapping. And let's find that field and enable it for synchronization. Excellent. So you can see it's altering the DB schema, and it'll go through it will continue through a few different steps here. Now it's reloading the table that has that new field. All right, and so with that done, let's actually export our configuration. So this is a JSON file that contains all the configurations for Connect, and we're going to save it to the repo, the GitHub repo for our app, in order to save it alongside our source code so we can easily deploy it elsewhere. So here we're going to use the Heroku CLI, and we're just verifying that we're attached to the correct app here in order to actually dump the Postgres schema that now contains this new Connect field that's being synced from Salesforce. So here we'll also commit this to Git so that we have our database schema saved alongside our source code. And then finally here, we're going to do a Ruby specific thing. So this is different but depending on the kind of app you have, you're building, where we're going to load the schema into our local database so that we can actually start developing a feature against it. All right, so at this point, we can actually start doing the development work. Now, I'm not going to dive into that here because there's a limited amount of time to demonstrate how this process actually works with Connect. But you can just trust me that that we actually can do our front-end work. We can set up the right APIs on our Node server, and we have the Connect database schema locally in order to work with this new field. All right, so once I've developed this feature, what we want to do is actually see what it looks like to push our change in order to test it live with Salesforce. So by live, I mean with a development app, not with the production app. So when I say development, a pretty strongly held convention when you're building applications is that you have stages that you promote an application through before the changes you're making go to production. And of course, there's a number of different reasons we do this. We do this to ensure that we don't harm or leak customer data. We do this in order to have team collaboration, in order to verify and vet changes. We also do it so that we can even give previews to, say, the organization we're making changes for, so that they can approve changes before they actually get pushed to production. So this is a very standard way to develop software, and the way Salesforce works with this is that you have your production Salesforce org, and then in the environments leading up to the production org, we use Salesforce sandboxes. So development would probably be developer sandboxes, staging may be a full sandbox with data, like full data or data sampling. But this is a pretty standard way to do it. So what Heroku gives us is a construct called a pipeline. And so a pipeline is actually a formalized experience around how a team can work through this kind of set of environments. And so what we're going to do here is actually push to development. So you can do review apps, and review apps are an amazing feature that Heroku pipelines provide, where when you open a feature branch, you can automatically have a whole new application booted up just to demonstrate and test what is contained on that feature branch. But for sake of simplicity right now, we're going to demonstrate what it looks like to merge a pull request and see it deployed to the development environment and actually see it go live. All right, so here are the bullet points that cover what I just said. We're going to push to master, use pipeline auto deploy. Then we're going to load the connect config, and then we're going to actually demo this new feature we've added. All right, so this is my GitHub pull request, and what we're going to do is just go straight to merging that pull request. And so once that's merged, that's deploying in the background, and we're going to import our connect configuration JSON file that we exported earlier. And here now, once the as the import begins, there are quite a few steps it takes, but yes, now you can see it's actually beginning to build up the mappings in the Postgres database. So once that's done, let's take a look and see. So there's no anniversary date appearing there yet. Let's take a look. So here's our Salesforce org, and you can see we don't have a anniversary date yet. So let's set one to what we believe is Dash's birthday. And so now we've got a date there. Let's switch back over to our web app and see, do we have an anniversary date appearing yet? We don't have it appearing yet, and that is because it does take time for Connect to synchronize with Salesforce. And so for the developer, there's this Pull Now button where we can prod Connect to immediately synchronize. And then if we go back here, aha, now we can see our anniversary date has appeared. So this is a great way to be able to make changes and share them with your team, see how they work, and then promote them onward to your production. All right, so our final point here is around what this really does for Illuminate. How did implementing this application actually affect their Salesforce admin's life? And so the answer is, it didn't really affect their life. It just integrates. So those admins leverage their existing Salesforce knowledge, and I will actually demonstrate exactly what our features are here, but it leverages their existing knowledge, and also very important here, our application developers. So this is our tiny team where I was the primary developer. I did not have to make an admin experience. I didn't have to make a login system for admins. I didn't have to figure out how to organize all the data and provide the features they need. All of this is provided through the customized Salesforce org interface. And so let's actually take a look using our development instance, what the admin experience looks like. All right, so here is, let's refresh this page. We should see the donation that I just made, $6.29. All right, here it is. Let's zoom up a notch. All right, so here you can see we have quite a few different Shine It Forward fields that are attached to this opportunity. These, the donor name, personal text, and personal image URL, these are actually the dedication that I entered right after I made my donation. And so it's very easy for Illuminate staff to audit what people are entering there, to maybe change it if people request it to be changed for some reason. They also have this link that they could send back to the donor if the donor calls in and says, hey, I lost my access, I want to change my dedication. They can go directly to this link and pick back up with the customization. And then let's see here. So here's the actual Baylight that is attached to this opportunity. So if we go there, you'll see that this is our custom object where we actually have the what we call the floor and the cable, and the Baylight name is actually the light number. The state, so as different Baylights are available or reserved as they're being dedicated, or they become locked so no one else can acquire that light. We have these image parameters which have to do with the exact image coordinates that that light is located at within our large deep zoom image on the user interface. And then of course there's the actual link to the light where you can see exactly what that public light looks like. All right, and then you can see here we have the payment. And so we actually get the PayPal reference number, so it's possible for them to look up those PayPal donations directly. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So these opportunities just fit right into the workflow that Illuminate is used to. So that is the extent of what it's like to actually build a real-world app using Heroku Connect. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to tweet at me. I'm Marzi on Twitter. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. Have a beautiful day.